remind you to turn your cell phones off. We've had a couple of ringings going on over the last couple of weeks, and it would be less distracting if you just make sure that they're turned off if you happen to have one with you. That would be very good. Thank you very much. Other thing, we're only in our third session for this semester, but it's not too early to start thinking about who you might like to hear from next spring. We'll be going from the end of March to the end of May, and we have a little list already in preparation, so if you come across people you think this group would be interested in hearing from, let me know, or Susie, one of the other of us, can add them to our list, and we'll be starting to put the spring session together probably around the middle of November. So make a note of that. As always, contributions to the food table would be more than welcome if you feel up to baking something or cutting some food up or just putting a little something in Marveline's little container back there. We would be most appreciative of that. Today we have a treat. We have our friend Rob Mermin here, who a lot of you will know as the founder of Circus in Vermont. This is, we're interested to find that this is Rob's 5th presentation for our group, starting, I think it was in 2012 was his first one.
Oh, I was just a little kid.
You're just a little kid. He's talked to us from just about anything, from his career as a mime to his time at the circus, silent films, different odds and ends of magic that have been of interest to us. And today he's looking at all of that from a slightly different perspective. He is, let me see what I've got here. A founder of Circus. He trained with Marcel Marceau, which was one of the great things that he talked to us about, I think, one of his first times here. 40-year career in theater and circus, although you would not note that just because he still looks like he's 12 years old. And is no longer director of Circus, but still circus-minded. And that's a bit of what he's going to be talking to us about today. So please welcome Rob Mermin.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear that squeak? That's really musical. All right, well, I think this time around, how's the sound of that speaker? Is it echoing a little bit? This time around, I want to talk to you as if it was a conversation. So I don't want to just be lecturing at you. I want to have comments and questions, and raise your hand or jump up in the air and say, "Wait a minute, Rob. Wait a minute. Wait a minute." So anytime you think of something you want to know, just jump right in. So this is the 5th time I've been here. I talked about circus and mime, silent films, tricks, magic tricks. So I'm going to put it all together in what I'm up to now. First of all, I want to find out something about you folks. Is there a doctor in the house? There's one back there?
Yes.
What kind of doctor, if you don't mind?
Retired now.
Okay, how about, is there a neurologist in the house? Yes?
Neurophysiologist.
Neurophysiologist, I like that. Yeah, jump right in, and if I say anything that's wrong, we'll have a debate. How about, is there a physical therapist in the house? No, okay, but neurophysiologist, is that how you say it? Okay, this is good. I'll talk to you then. It was about 6 years ago, I went into my doctor's office, and I was complaining a little bit, as we always do with our doctor's visits. I was complaining about this ache and that ache and this thing and that thing. And I said, well, my left hand was shaking a little bit sometimes. And when I would lather up shampoo, this hand would be nice and rhythmical. This hand couldn't quite keep up the same rhythm as my right hand. And that was very odd. And I said, what do you think, Doc? And he said, go to a neurologist. I said, okay, why not? So I went to a neurologist, and if any of you have been to a neurologist, they put you through the simplest kinds of tests. No x-rays, none of this kind of highfalutin technical stuff. They say, okay, Rob, do this. Oh, it would be on I'd be sitting in a chair, and they say, okay, go like this. I said, okay, I can do that. I said, okay, go touch the finger to the nose, to the ear, whatever. And then walk down the hallway. So stop, turn, walking down the hallway. And he said, well, I'm sorry to inform you, but I'm pretty sure you've got Parkinson's disease. Just like that. And I said, well, that's very curious. That would explain a few things, the shampooing, the odd kind of movement. My balance was fine, my walking was okay, but there were signs and symptoms that become very obvious to a trained neurologist. And at that point, I was having some trouble with my left hand keeping up with my right, doing this kind of thing. But he said he thinks I'm a little bit ahead of the game because of my training. And that's my training in mime and circus activity. Because in training for mime, you become very aware of every single movement that you're doing. When I was working with Marceau, I would come back from mime class, this was in Paris, and anything I was doing, if I was turning on the tap to wash my face, how did I turn on the tap? Was it with my right hand or with my left hand? The water's coming out here. Am I splashing my face this way, or am I bringing my face down to the water? Every single movement I would be very much aware of. As I'm reaching for a glass of water, I would notice, my elbow's up. Or if it was down, I would notice that my elbow's down. How am I drinking it? Am I throwing my head back as I'm doing it, or am I leaning forward? So every posture, every position, every daily movement, brushing my teeth, I would notice how am I moving and how am I doing it. So then when he said, well, you've got Parkinson's, which is basically a movement disorder. Though it's a lot more than that. There's cognitive problems and other things. But for a long time, it was considered a movement disorder. So I started teaching a weekly class for people with Parkinson's. Does anybody here have Parkinson's? Anybody been diagnosed? Okay, good. I started teaching a weekly class down in Montpelier for people who have Parkinson's, and I was teaching them mime and circus tricks to see if anything had helped me, would it also help other people. And so what I found out, this was a few years ago I started teaching class, and we have Joan here who was a member of that class for a little while. I found out that, first of all, you have to observe everything. Not only yourself, how you're moving, what your posture is, how you're sitting, do you have a leg crossed, is your arm up? Observe things in yourself and observe everybody else. How are people walking down the street? How are people talking on their phones and they're gesturing? How are they gesturing? So you observe things and then you become aware of what's working and what's not. So for example, the doctor said, walk down the hallway, and he's observing me. And as I'm doing that, I'm realizing that my right arm is swinging, but my left arm was not swinging as much as my right arm, right? Like this. Until I would think about it. Say, oh, my left arm is not swinging so much? So, well, let's swing it. So I had to observe that my left arm wasn't swinging. I became aware of it. And then the next thing is to visualize a correct movement. So as I'm thinking, oh, I need to swing that arm opposite to my leg. So, okay, no problem. Thinking about it, I can correct the movement. So, again, first it's observation, then awareness, then visualize how you want to correct your movement, then practice it by doing it in mind. If I'm reaching for that glass and my hand might be shaking, if I had a real glass and picking up, is there any shaking going on? No, it's okay, thanks. So then I would think, well, how would I do it in mime? I would raise my elbow, I would raise my wrist, bring my wrist forward to touch the glass. take the shape of the glass, pick it up, my elbow is up, put it down, let go of it, bring my arm back around and side. So in regular speeding, it'd be like this. I wouldn't have to think about it very much. But I am very aware of how I'm doing it in mind. So that, again, helps me with the Parkinson's. I become aware of how I would want to do it correctly, how to do the movement, so I visualize it in mind, then I would do the real action with a real cup and see if my movement is any better. Having gone through these, I think, 6 steps: observation, awareness, visualization, then analysis of the movement, the wrong movement or the right movement, then do it in mind, then do the real action. So I go through these steps. Now, for me, having Parkinson's is like doing mime all day. Because when you're doing mime on the stage, as I said, you're aware of every single movement that you make. When you have Parkinson's, you have to think of every movement that you want to make. You're constantly thinking. It's a thinking process. I'm always aware of everything that I'm doing. As I'm talking to you like this, I'm aware that I'm making a gesture, a little round gesture with this hand. And as I'm talking, I realize that I'm using this hand a lot, so I will purposely stop and start using this hand. But I'm thinking about that as I'm talking to you. Sometimes I would use both hands in a gesture. Now, in the class, we started to study gesture, what I'm calling the rhetoric of gesture. What is going on neurologically when you think of making a movement? I'm not sure what's going on neurologically, but something can happen, and a popular term that's been thrown around a lot in the recent years is plasticity, neuroplasticity, where the brain can learn new things no matter how old you are. You can learn a new language, you can learn a new skill with repetition, with practice, and something happens neurologically. Now, I think, let me explain another term that I don't know if you, sir, know anything about the term paradoxical kinesia? No. Okay. In my research, I came across this term, and the word paradoxical really appealed to me, of course. So, kinesia paradoxica is the Latin term. That's when, for example, someone with a movement disorder suddenly, with some trigger, can move just fine for a short period of time, and then back to having a movement disorder. So, Parkinson's disease is known as PD, Parkinson's disease. But in our class, we decided that we don't like the word disease. Because you go to the doctor and he says, well, Parkinson's disease, it's progressive, debilitating, and there's no cure. Well, thanks a lot, Doc. Why don't you be a little negative? So we decided instead of calling it Parkinson's disease, we call it PD, Parkinson's disorder. You can correct a disorder. Now, the term paradoxical kinesia, in fact, I have a definition of that. Where is it? Oh, well, first, neuroplasticity. That's the brain's ability to learn new skills and adapt to or modify neural dysfunction. And here's from a neurology research book, quote, "There's compelling evidence that motor imagery, visualizing certain movements in the mind's eye, can also enhance the execution of learned skills. Thus, imagined movements appear to be equivalent to those that are actually performed, and going through the motions mentally can lead to the same kind of neuroplastic changes in the brain." Interesting, eh?
That's what athletes do, huh?
That's what athletes do. So who needs to go to the gym? Just sit at home and imagine it. But actually, Well, one doctor said, yeah, there's something that does go on with the muscles when you imagine doing exercise. So there's something happening neurologically when you can imagine things. Athletes, absolutely. Say a basketball player, he's on the free throw line, you know, it's 2 seconds to the end of the game, and he needs to get a basket to win. He doesn't just pick up the ball and throw it. No, he's bouncing it, he's mentally imagining, he's staring at the basket, imagining the throw, imagining that ball going through the air, swoosh. And as soon as he can picture that and imagine it, visualize it, then he does it. Swoosh. And he's more likely to have success having imagined it first. The imagination is a force of nature. If I make no other statement today, that's my statement for today. Imagination is a force of nature. It can change things. It can change the world. It can change your health. It can change how you think. So back to paradoxical kinesia. You could go online, and there's a lot of videos. There's one really interesting one of a man who's had Parkinson's for 20-odd years. He's walking like this. He's shuffling along. He can barely take steps. Gets into a festination, which is when you're taking small steps quickly and you can't stop yourself. And he's got the tremors. The video shows him being led outside by a couple of nurses helping him, holding onto his arm. They lead him out to a parking lot where there's a bicycle. And they help him onto the bicycle. As soon as he's on the bicycle, he's sitting up straight and he's riding that bicycle between the cars that are parked all around in circles. Comes back, gets off the bicycle, and he's like this, and they got to help him again. What's going on neurologically? I don't know. I'm not sure that the neurologists know either what this paradoxical kinesia is all about. But I'd like to think that the brain is intelligent enough that if there's a damaged neural pathway, well, the brain realizes that and searches out a healthy neural pathway to use to make the movement. It's like, we're driving in Vermont on a dirt road in mud season. If we know that it's going to be a muddy dirt road with all these problems, well, okay, we'll go and take a road that's not muddy. So maybe the brain is doing that with plasticity, with paradoxical kinesia. So when I'm teaching the mime class for people with Parkinson's and any other movement disorder, I'm trying to think, how could we purposefully trigger that kinesia paradoxica? So instead of waiting to see if it'll happen at some point or other, let's see if we can purposely trigger and stimulate that impulse by using the imagination. And in the class, we've been doing all kinds of things. Not only the mime, so we're imagining how to use space and how to move through space, but also tricks and games. Because that not only it triggers brain activity when you're playing a game, but also you make it physical. I brought some props here just in case we want to play a little bit. And also magic tricks. Because I'm thinking, what's going on with a magic trick? When I'm doing a magic trick, whether it's a rope trick or a card trick or anything else, I usually, even though I'm the guy doing the trick, I surprise myself. I thought, did that really work? And so I'm thinking, what's going on neurologically? And when you're watching a magic trick, it's like, wait a minute, there was a discrepant event there. That should not happen. But my eyes saw it happen. Well, simple tricks. This is not a magic trick. This is just a rope demonstration of the world's fastest one-hand knot. Let's see. That's pretty fast. So I showed this to the mime class because at the end of the class we would always do some kind of circus games, balancing or juggling. Excellent for brain activity. So I'm showing them this, and what you have to do, here's the scissors, these two fingers here. So I'm going to turn my hand down quickly, and those scissors are going to grab the end of the short rope here, grab it and let everything else fall. Now, the people with Parkinson's are having a hard time with this. At first, you know, they might have tremor and they can't quite get it. But there was one guy in the class, Bill Russell, who was working and working and working, and suddenly comes in and says, "Like that, Rob?" Good for him. So I'm thinking, what's going on? What's happening neurologically? But the other rope trick that he really liked better than the one-handed knot was pulling the rope through the neck, through the skin, through the bones, through the throat. So it took him a few months. You know, I'm showing him every week. I'm showing him how to do that, how to do that. And it took him a few months, but then he comes in and goes, "Like that?" And he was so excited because he could show his grandkids and things like that. So I realized that anything we do in daily activity can turn into an exercise. So I go up to the refrigerator. Here's the refrigerator. And normally you walk up to the refrigerator, you open the handle and the door opens and you reach in for something. So when I think about it, I think, well, let me walk up to the refrigerator, which is up here, but I'll stop this far away. So then I take a lunge position to open the door, reach in. You know, so I'm stretching my legs and I'm getting something from the refrigerator into an exercise. And I'm noticing my posture. Am I hunched over like this, reaching for something? Or no, I took a lunge and I might reach for the milk or something like that, close it, and then step backwards into a straight position. Brushing the teeth, drinking, eating, gesturing. Every daily activity that you do, when you go home after this, notice, anytime during the day, think about what I'm saying here and say, oh, let me see how I'm doing this. If you're walking to the living room, if you're turning on the TV, if you're anything, say, oh, how's my arm movement? Is my brain aware of what I'm doing? Can I purposely change how I'm doing it? You know, can I sit up straight or can I walk straight? Are both my arms swinging? Anything you do, you could start to analyze and observe throughout the day. And if you want to improve it, purposely improve it. Visualize how you want to improve whatever you're doing physically. Another thing we were doing is juggling. And instead of using tennis balls, because when you drop a tennis ball, it'll start rolling all over the place, and then you have too much exercise trying to get it out from under the couch. So bean bags are great. So I found all these, Salvation Army bean bags. Animals are great to toss in the air. So I also found out that with a guy who was having problems walking because of the Parkinson's, shuffling along like this, I found out that he had a rubber ball, and I said, okay, toss from one hand to the other as you're walking. So he's walking like this, and then he starts tossing it. He doesn't realize that he's walking better. He's focusing on something else. He's focusing on something outside of him. And another thing that he did with the Parkinson's, he also sometimes would freeze. And this is another symptom when, especially in doorways, closed spaces like that, like a doorway, he'd be walking along, suddenly he would freeze and he can't move. He wants to move, but he can't. So there are various techniques for getting out of that. You have to find what works for you. Instead of trying to step forward, maybe step back and then forward, or step to the side and then forward. You have to change what you're doing. So I'm showing them how to do, the invisible wall mime thing. And he said, can I imagine a door? I said, that's it. That's perfect. So when he would get stuck in a doorway and he can't move, he would mime a door and a doorknob, open the door and push it right through, and he walks right through it, and he can keep on going.
That's just bizarre.
The imagination is a force of nature. So what's going on here? Can he learn to trigger that paradoxical kinesia impulse on his own, like that, by imagining what's going on in his brain? I'm not really sure, but it's a fascinating thing to think about. For the sake of our neurophysiologist here, I will read a neurological description of the paradoxical kinesia impulse. This was written by a neurologist, one of the first guys I was working with in Burlington. Cortico-subcortical motor circuit dysfunction impairs action selection, sequencing, and the scaling of movements, as well as motivational aspects of motor function, all difficulties for patients living with Parkinson's. My Pantomime Parkinson's project explores how the modulation of neuroplasticity by mime circus techniques may facilitate the understanding of the pathophysiology of PD and help design a potentially new mode of exercise. These methods may reset dysfunctional cortico-subcortical loops and thus override frozen circuits and turn on dormant systems relating to paradoxical kinesia, that is, an obverse role for the hyperdirect cortico-subcortical pathway. Thank you. I got through that. Don't you love terminology in any field? Yes, sir.
Didn't you mean just establishing a new circuit?
Yeah.
Is that what I meant? Could be. It could very well be. But if you're going to establish a new neurological circuit, can you do it on purpose? That's what I'm trying to find out.
Yes.
That's where your will comes in.
Yes, I think so. Why do you think we can?
Because I think that they, say somebody's had a stroke and they've lost one part of their brain use, they can somehow, through training, they can all of a sudden have the other part of the brain that mirrors it, do it, even though that part is not geared to be doing that.
So do you think well, physical therapy is more physical training?
Because they also do, with speech, they also do a whole bunch of different things to teach you how to relive. Okay, sometimes people have a stroke and they have to be taught how to walk again.
Yes.
They have to be taught to crawl and then walk. Because if the kids, if a child learns in the wrong order, he will never walk correctly. He has to crawl. You always have to crawl before you walk.
You have to crawl before you walk. Why don't animals have to do that?
They do.
They do?
It's called swimming. Okay, we raise puppies, and the puppies swim around on their back, on their bellies for maybe 2 weeks, looking for mom, and then they slowly start
Swimming on their bellies on the ground.
On the,
Yeah.
on the
The
ground.
belly is flat on the ground, but the feet are out sideways.
And it's like swimming.
Well, we should all go home and try that in your living room. Who knows? I mean, we're all at an age where there's something that we have to be thinking about.
Well, even with somebody that's been in an accident or something, a lot of times they will start them off crawling again,
Interesting.
to get their motion back, to learn how to walk again.
And rhythm is involved in that crawling. It's not just crawling, it's rhythmical.
Oh, yeah. You
It's like
got
learning to
one,
dance.
two.
It's like learning to dance. Yes, in the back?
Not a physical therapist, but a speech therapist. And I think a lot of this involves motor memory. And I know that when people are faced, when they've had a stroke and can't speak, they very often can sing. And therapists use a technique called melodic intonation therapy. And so the motor movement is there, but it's not, but the memory of the motor movement has to be restored.
That's interesting. One of the symptoms also of more advanced Parkinson's is your voice gets softer and softer and softer. And so I'm so curious about that kind of thing. Are they not aware that they're talking softly? I think they're not. A lot of people in the class, because they're talking like this and their vocal cords are okay, but they're talking like this and they don't realize that I can't hear them. And so I have to go like this, and oh, okay, I'm talking louder now. So they're not aware. And I think again, with more advanced Parkinson's, people are not aware of how they're not how they're not moving properly. There's one fellow in the class who was very stooped over, and that starts to happen too. The posture goes, and I said, can you straighten up a little more, stand up straight? He said, I am standing straight. And I said, no. So unless he walks in front of a mirror, he's not aware. So one of the things we do in the class, we play with ribbons. And the juggling, we juggle, I don't know if I did this in the trick class I did here a couple years ago, with juggling with the plastic bags.
Yeah.
Yeah? That was really interesting. You could take go to the supermarket,
Give
get
them
a
any
produce
more.
bag.
Give them any more.
They're free, except for the produce that you buy. And you blow it up and tie it off. And what happens is that it floats so easily. I usually tie it off with a little rubber band. But this fellow who had such bad posture, I gave him some of these plastic bags that were juggling. And suddenly, because again, like the fellow who's walking with the beanbag, he's focusing on an object. And he's tossing it in the air and catching it and tossing it. So his posture was like this. But as soon as he's tossing it as high as he can to reach the ceiling, he's like this for a second. And he's like this. But then he's like this. So I said to him, get yourself a plastic bag, and when you're walking downtown, just... So you have to find what works for you, to improve whatever symptom you have in any way. Yes?
I just want to say that when I was learning to crawl, I was told later that I crawled backwards, and then when I crawled into a corner, I couldn't get out.
Crawling backwards into a corner, and you can't get out because you didn't know how to go forward. How interesting.
That happens a lot.
That happened with dogs?
No, it doesn't, it does happen with us, but with babies, it happens more often than people realize, and people don't, they just don't pay attention, enough attention to it to really see, they
Babies do that,
are
yeah.
backing up first. They do back up.
How interesting. I didn't know that. Another thing to think about is ambidexterity. Now, when I was a kid, I practiced, I'm right-handed, but I was practicing doing everything with my left hand because it bothered the heck out of me that my left hand couldn't do the same things as my right. So in the 4th grade, I did a science project. My teacher, good for her, let me practice juggling and doing everything with my left hand, writing, to see if I can get better. So now, well, I found that there's certain things that they're not equal, but they do different things. Like I found that if I'm playing baseball and I'm batting right-handed, I can place hit wherever I want, left field, right field. I have better control. But if I want to go for a home run, for some reason I'll bat lefty and I can whack the thing better. And of course juggling, 2 or 3 objects, it is great for learning ambidexterity and learning to use your other side, which again, for people with Parkinson's or stroke or anything like that, it's really important to be able to use both sides. Let's try something here. Put up one index finger, everybody, and in 10 seconds, see how many numbers you can make in space. For example, here's 1, here's 2, here's 3. So see how far you get. Wait, don't start yet. Ready, go. Stop. What number did you reach?
7.
6, 12? 13?
Wow, so people are fast.
2? Try this. Put your hand up, your finger up again, and
Same finger, same hand?
same finger, same hand. Your good hand, let's say that. And either print or write. Do kids learn how to do script anymore? Or
Cursive
Oh, it's terrible. So what you're going to do is you're going to write your name in big letters. This time, not really small, but big. Go for it. Your first name. All right. Can you, now do it again, but don't look at me. Look at what you're writing. Look at your own letters. Go for it. Interesting. How you're looking at things. Try it again with both index fingers up. It's not as hard as you think. You're going to spell your first name, but your odd hand will be doing it backwards. But don't even think about it. Go for it.
What do you mean the odd hand's going to be doing it backwards?
Okay, this is interesting. Some of you are doing it parallel.
Yeah, I'm doing it parallel.
Okay, now on purpose, try to do your good hand in the right direction and your odd hand mirroring it in backwards. It's not as hard as you think. Okay, well, try this when you go home with a piece of paper and 2 pencils. It starts to happen automatically that if you're thinking of your good hand and concentrating on that, your odd hand will perfectly mirror it without having to think about it.
But shouldn't, when you
But mine
guys
went
do
parallel.
more in parallel, because then if you ever do measure your good hand.
Well, yes and no. I mean, sometimes you want to write things that are secret. So you do it backwards like Leonardo da Vinci. Yes.
I automatically was parallel, like right away. When you said it was backwards, I didn't know what you're talking about. I had to really think about it to make it mirror.
See, now this is also very interesting neurologically. I can't explain it, but I'm going to say a word, and let's see. The word is apple. Apple. So when I said that word, what did you see? Did you see an image of an apple, or did you see the word apple spelled out in your mind? How many saw an image? How many saw the word spelled? Wow, it's about equal. How many of you saw an image with the word spelled over it? Next to it. Interesting. So it's how you visualize things.
That's interesting.
Can you explain anything going on neurologically, neurophysiologically?
Imagination is the force of the brain.
Excellent.
Parkinson, because some are so rigid they can't move anymore, and so what's happening in the brain?
What's happening in the brain when rigidity sets in with Parkinson's? Again, I don't know what's going on in the brain, but some of the symptoms early on with me 6 years ago was rigidity. But it's not a muscle rigidity. It's so hard to explain to a doctor. It's not like you're stiff. It's not muscular. It's something inside. It's I don't know, the nervous system. It's the rigidity that I could feel.
But you are stiff.
But I am stiff? What do you mean?
There's a stiffness in the limb.
With that kind of rigidity?
Yes.
Could very well be, yeah. The doctor started to give me a very, very low dose, which I'm still on, of the carbidopa levodopa. And it loosened me up. You know, I was starting to give talks like
We
this.
have 40 minutes.
And I was here a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, doing the tricks.
1 hour.
How was I doing then? Do you remember? Just fine. Yeah, I'm sort of doing just fine here. People who don't know me very well have no idea that I have Parkinson's. but I'm extremely aware of having Parkinson's. As I said, every single movement, I just made a gesture like that. I'm aware of doing it as I'm doing it. So I've started to make also a study of what I call the rhetoric of gesture. So in the beginning of the mime class, we started sitting around in the first 10 or 15 minutes in the circle was, okay, Frank, how was your week? Tell us, anything happened interesting to you? And he's talking, and he said, well, my grandkids came to visit, and they were running around the living room, and so I'm looking at him, and I'm going, my grandkids came, and they started running around the living room, and da-da-da, and he continues to talk after his gesturing, but then he forgot, and his hands froze up again. And then we went out to the zoo, we saw these animals, and he's looking at me, and I'm going, gesture. So he's somehow forgetting to gesture or not aware that he's not gesturing until he thinks about it. So autonomous movement, movements that you don't think about, don't happen with Parkinson's. Movements are not natural anymore. Gesture is not natural. So I'm telling the class, I say, go home tonight, and when you're having dinner with your spouse or you're at a restaurant, purposefully gesture and exaggerate the gesture. Because as you exaggerate it, it'll look normal to everybody else.
So are you saying that the minute I stop gesticulating all over the place, I might have Parkinson's?
I'm not
I would
exaggerating.
be suspicious.
No.
No?
Well, this is a good point here, because as I started to teach the class how to gesture. So I'm thinking, let's codify gesture. So one would be, and you can all try this where you're sitting. Your right hand, just make a little circle with your palm up. You know, like this. Make a little gesture with the other hand, palm up. Both hands circle. Little gesture. Both hands circle with your shrugging your shoulders. Both palms down. Palms facing the person you're talking to. One palm. So just codifying any kind of gesture. You know, my palm is towards you, then I turn around with the palm up with a little circle. I'm thinking about it as I'm doing it. And I'm starting to realize when I watch people who don't have Parkinson's, most people don't gesture a lot. Unless you're Italian or Jewish, you know. Or a politician. Politicians have people training them how to gesture when you're talking to, you know, millions of people on the TV. Obama was great with inclusive gestures. He would include people as he's talking. You know, we can do better. We can all do better is what his gesture is saying. Very inclusive. It wasn't palms down kind of thing. So
What does Trump do?
what does Trump do? I have to tell you, I avoid watching him. Anytime he's going to appear anywhere on TV or anything else, I can't look at him. And part of that is who he is, and part of it is body language. Notice each other's body language throughout the day. It goes like that?
A lot of them go like that.
Yeah, which is very aggressive. You must do this, you must do that. I know better than you. You know, can you imagine Hitler if his palm was up? It wouldn't be as strong or as effective.
Has the palm down?
As the palm down, which is oppressive, pushing down. And every country has their own way of speaking and their own way of gesturing too. You have to be careful. You don't get the wrong gesture. I won't go into that. But notice if you are a gesture person, a non-gesture person, or sometimes gesture person throughout the day. And when you think of it, exaggerate your gestures a little bit more and see if anybody notices that you're talking to. I bet they won't. But you will notice somebody who is gesticulating a lot. And it could be a very graceful thing. As you're watching them, they're talking, and they're sort of acting out the story of their lives, or whatever they're saying to you. They're moving. They're not just like this. They're not just a talking head. Now, that brings up a point about modern TV and modern film that I mentioned years ago here when I was talking about silent film, is that now directors film everything in close-ups because people are watching on their little devices. So they need the image to be big. So, and their close-ups, watch the news, watch the talking heads. The close-up is from here to here. They're cutting off the top of the head even. So you're not seeing the body language at all. You're not seeing the gesture. You're not seeing if they're being oppressive or if they're being inclusive, or you're just seeing this talking head. And so I don't trust anybody in a close-up. I want to see their body language, because then I can tell what they're really saying. And what comes first, the gesture or the words? What do you think? Gesture. Absolutely. The body language comes first, and then the language. Yeah, I think I used this example before. If I'm sitting here and somebody comes in the room and says to me, "Rob, what's that?" And I'm looking, and I'll say, "I don't know." The gesture was first. If I did it in reverse, it feels awkward. "Rob, what was that?" "I don't know." It's sort of wrong. It doesn't feel natural. So it's the gestures, the body language that comes first. What's happening neurologically? I'm fascinated to find out when you start doing body language on purpose, which is, again, gearing me towards working on discovering triggers for paradoxical kinesia. Yes, sir?
So there must be three things going on. First, you have to have the thought, don't you? And then the expression, and then the words. Is that right?
If you have Parkinson's, yeah. If you have Parkinson's, the question was the three things. You have the thought first, and then the movement, and then the speaking, or?
Yeah, and then the words.
Well, normally, the body language comes naturally. You're not thinking about it at all. You know, I was just shaking my head a little bit. I wasn't thinking about that.
Well, your brain operated your body to make that movement.
Yeah, but it's an autonomous movement. It happens naturally. What are you getting at?
Like dialing a phone number or something?
Yep.
And we say 3-2 instead of 2-3. However, if I always think the numbers, like 2-3, say 2-3, I'll never make a mistake. Because I can say it, hear it, and see it. And 3/4 of my brain works.
That's like when you write something down, you can remember it so much better than if you're trying to remember it just in your head, right?
Yeah, I used to write down the shopping list and then forget it at home, but I always remember everything was on the list.
Because you wrote it down first. Yeah, yes.
Can't we just go back to when babies don't talk before they gesture? I said the same order. The baby gestures because he's hurt or something.
He's
And
moving.
then-
That's what he
Yeah.
knows.
Yeah, that's what he knows.
Yeah.
So isn't that the
Movement.
same, isn't that natural?
Movement
Isn't that a
is,
natural
movement is
order?
natural first, yeah. Language you have to learn. Though on the other hand, I think we need to learn movement better. I think, you know, starting my college thesis, I hadn't thought about this in 50 years. My college thesis was on movement education, kindergarten through high school. And I went class by class. Here's what 5-year-olds, what we should be teaching them about movement. Here's first graders, what we should do, kind of exercises. Not just sports, not just dance. They're all good. But what about movement education? Gesture, body language, expressiveness through physicality and not just through verbal noise.
Now they're trying to slap that out of the kids because they don't want people under the people's space.
Yeah, and kids, they're looking at their little device like this. They're slumped over, and so their posture, they're nearsighted kids more often these days.
I had an accident about 8 years ago. It was my brother's goat, was in the vault, and I fell and I broke 4 ribs. But I had to get out of the boat. But because I did yoga and I was more conscious of my body, I was able to contract my, take, really, really analyze what I was doing, like contract the abdomen, really
Winter ribs.
concentrate on my movement to be able to get out of the boat, go down the ladder.
Yeah, it's very purposeful because you were injured.
I was badly injured.
So that's sort of like having a movement disorder, whether it's
Yeah.
Parkinson's or MS or anything else, is when you're injured, say you have a broken rib or a broken arm or something, suddenly you're aware of every single movement that you're making throughout the day. That's like having Parkinson's. It's a mental activity that for me anyway, because of my training, I'm so aware. As I said, I observe movement, I'm aware of it, then I analyze it, then I visualize how I want to do it, then I go through the whole list in a split second. But it's like when you have to compensate because of something else going on in your body. Yes?
I'm curious about when someone with Parkinson's is signing their name, their signature gradually gets smaller and smaller and smaller by the end of their name. Do you know what the cause of that is? They start out normal and by the end of, they're just minuscule letters.
Yeah.
I don't know what causes that.
Yeah, with Parkinson's, that's another trait that comes up with more advanced symptoms, is that the handwriting gets very, very, very small. Why? I have no idea. And what's curious to me, again, is can they not see that it's very small and therefore correct it and purposely go bigger?
It's one way of diagnosing Parkinson's.
It is.
Yeah.
And maybe they're not aware of it. They don't.
I think they're not aware of it. The same thing with the speaking softly. They're not aware that you're speaking softly until you mention it, and then they can correct it. So I'm trying to push for people with PD to be more aware. Awareness, for me, is the whole thing. Once you're aware of something, then you could correct it. Back to the swing of the arm, which is one of the first symptoms that a neurologist looks for. Is his arm not swinging as he walks? But you can really correct that. It's so obvious. When you think, oh, let me swing my arm on purpose, then you could do it. So why can't people with PD do it more often? And that's something I'm really studying. Yes, sir?
I think it has to do with the sense of effort. That on a side that's not functioning properly, it requires more mental effort. And so the microgravity or this writing, small writing, is they're not aware because they're putting a lot of effort into it, but the output is not the same. They're
mental
more
output?
attuned to the effort that they're putting into the gesture without really using the visual feedback or other feedback to modulate what's actually happening. So when you're not swinging your arm, for example, you think you're putting the same effort into both sides, but the output side says, no, you're not.
No, you're not. That's right. It's a big mental effort. Do you think people with a movement disorder stop making that mental effort, so therefore they're not aware?
I think they're not aware.
Yeah. Do you think with work, like with physical therapy after a stroke or something, with work, they could become more aware? People with PD or neurological.
It's pretty clear with people with stroke, because their musculature is weaker, that their sense of effort has to be much greater in order to achieve the same output.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't realize that it's not just physical effort, but mental effort is so high when you're compensating for some kind of disorder or disease or injury. Mental effort, and with PD, I'm a senior citizen now, so yeah, I like taking naps when I can, but I think, and I can't know for sure, but I think having PD and being aware all day long of every single movement, the mental effort, is a tiring thing. So when I can take a nap, I'll take a nap and say, this is glorious, this is fun.
Your mind training would be very helpful because you've already built up that mental strength from the miming.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, the mental effort is, for me, visualization. And for me, visualizing things in space is very easy because of my training. And I'm aware, like my brother has a real hard time visualizing anything. He's not a visual person. He was a child psychologist because I think he was always trying to figure me out, the younger brother. But very rational. He has a hard time visualizing. When if I say apple or elephant, he can't see it in his mind's eye.
There's a disorder, there's a name for that disorder. I can't for the life of me remember it, but I have a friend who has that disorder, and so does her son, but to a different degree. And she's a master's of engineering and teaches at a college, and she cannot visualize anything, she says. So going to school was very difficult. Memorizing is very difficult because you cannot actually see anything. It's weird.
That's intriguing.
Yeah, and it was just like a couple of weeks ago she was telling me this. I thought, wow, never heard of that.
And then you wonder if with certain kinds of training you could learn to visualize better.
I have no idea.
To a small degree, it's possible.
But I know she was saying, like, for her son in school, they had to have special,
Teacher's aid.
well, not necessarily teacher's aid, but they had to do special things to accommodate the fact that he couldn't actually visualize anything.
It's also interesting. I'm just keeping track of time.
Every morning I visualize walking correctly. That I understand. But on the other hand, you said that if you forget about it and are doing something else, like juggling or with that balloon, that works too. So in one case, you're visualizing what you need to do. In the other case, you have to forget the problem you have by doing something else.
Excellent point. Did you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Two different ways of doing things. She visualizes how to walk better in the morning, but then again, earlier I said not only that, but then try not to think about it sometimes because you're focusing on doing something else. Whatever works.
The trouble is, once I start thinking about something else, I forget how to walk properly.
All I can suggest is try doing both at the same time in a way that works. You can't do that? Okay, try this. Everybody try this. We did something like this in a class. Remember patty cake, patty cake? Well, you could just do this by yourself without a partner here. Try doing, let me do this first if I can remember. You do this on your knees. I'll just do it on here. I'll go double, double, double. No, there was this was with a partner. Actually, you could turn to somebody next to you and watch me first. And I'm going double, double, this to your partner's hands. Double, double, turn your hand around, that. Double this, double that, double this, that.
I can remember that far.
I'll talk you through it.
Too complicated. Oh, that's too complicated.
Okay, you ready? If you have a partner, great. You don't just do it yourself. So here we go.
This.
Make a fist. And go
That.
double, this. Double, that.
I don't have no idea.
Double this, double that, double this, that. Okay, one more time. A little faster. Ready, go. double, double this, double, double that, double this, double that, double this, that. Okay. All right, well, that's, with your grandkids, make up your own kinds of paddywhacks, and you'll have a great time for an hour on a rainy day. Yes, sir, in the back?
I was just wondering, I presume you're being followed by a doctor as you see somebody periodically every 6 months, every year?
Every 6 months. Yeah.
And what does he think, or what do they tell you about some of your observations about what seems to work? Is that something that is out there as a, in the research world?
Good question. The question is about my neurologist and other neurologists. I've given talks like this, but demonstrating more things to neurology groups and physical therapy groups. And the question is, how do they respond to what I'm saying and demonstrating? It's interesting. My neurologist in Burlington, do this, walk down the hall, the usual, well, you seem to be doing fine, Rob, come back in 6 months. Okay. Doesn't need to up my medication or anything, and it's been 6 years. When I talk to a physical therapy group, and there's a group out in Tucson, actually, that I'm starting to work with, a group of physical therapists who are very intrigued by the idea of combining visualization to the movements that they're using. For example, so I'm going to go out there again in the winter and work with the physical therapists, teaching them mime techniques. And they were showing me some of their movements. For example, one movement was sitting back like this with your arms out, and then standing straight and then going. So I said to her, okay, well, to me, that could be a couple of things. That could be Harry Potter casting a spell, or it could be a motorcycle rider, And then they had another movement, which was one of these, turn, so you're twisting, doing this. I said, oh, well, you're killing mosquitoes. So let's kill this mosquito, let's kill it up here, and let's kill it down here. And so I'm adding visualization techniques to their physical therapy movements, which makes it easier for the patient to remember and more fun. So some of them are putting together mosquitoes with casting spells with and making routines out of that. So there's some interest in the idea of mime and these 6 methods that I've talked about: the observation, awareness, analysis, visualization stuff. There's some interest, but I'm trying to get it out there more as I'm still exploring what works for me, and then I translate that to other people so you can adapt what I know.
Okay, there were 6 things. Can you say the 6 things again?
6 things: observation, awareness, analysis of what you're seeing. That's 3. And then the next one is visualization, how you want to do it better. Then do it in mind first, physically, without an object or without anything else, and then do the action for real. Yes?
What was the point of that exercise, that double this? What was?
To have some fun. But also, something's going on. You're watching. Then you're going double this. Oh, wait a minute. No, it's this, it's that. So once you get it, okay. One more thing along the same lines, and I'll explain why I do this with people. So watch what I'm doing here. Okay, my thumb up, and I'm pointing to the other thumb. As I'm talking, I'm not thinking about it anymore. So let's all try this. Put one thumb up, the other index finger points to it. And then you're going to switch sides. Point to the other thumb and switch back again. That's a little hard, right? At first. So when I first started doing this, I was going like, wait a minute. So then you have to go through a process of how you're going to learn this. What's the neuroplasticity of this technique? So I'm thinking, okay, my thumb is up, I'm pointing to it. Let me do it one at a time. This thumb goes up, then I point to that. Then I change that, then I change that. And then pretty soon, something neurologically happens, your body knows what to do, and I don't have to think about it anymore. But at first, you got to think about it like learning any skill. So what intrigues me is the neurological moment when suddenly your body knows how to do it, doesn't think about it anymore. It becomes autonomous. Yes, sir?
Like right in the back.
There's good evidence that there are different parts of the brain, that as you're learning a new motor skill, that it's a cortical process, and the tracks coming from the motor cortex to the spinal cord that actually produce the movement. And we have trouble when we're learning a new motor skill, trying to type or drive a car and so forth. We're very conscious of each gesture you make, but the more you practice it, and this is something you can't override cognitively. You can't read a book and know how to play tennis. You've got to practice the game and the sequence of movements, but once it becomes automatic, it becomes really ingrained and stored in another part of the brain.
Is it a memory thing?
It is a motor memory.
A motor memory.
And there's very good evidence that part of the brain is the cerebellum. And if that is damaged, then you do lose the ability to make sequential movements with the same fluidity. The other thing that I thought was very interesting about what you're saying is that in Parkinson's, it's been said that there's a problem with integrating the posture with the movement. And posture control, let me define posture for you. That it's the gravitational support that allows you to make a gesture. If you displace the center of gravity of the body, you're going to need, it's not just reaching out this way, but your muscles in your trunk and so forth. There's a whole adaptation of the skeleton. And what happens, I think, with a lot of Parkinson's patients is the postural support isn't there. But if you can help them, sometimes Parkinsonian patients, you can lean them forward when they're blocked and their locomotor destination that you were talking about doesn't happen. But you can start it by putting them in the right posture.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Because something does start to happen with posture and balance. And so something physically needs to be corrected if possible. As you're saying that, a thought came to my head and I just lost it. So what happened there, neurologically? Is that Parkinson's or is that age?
Did you see any cognitive differences?
Pardon?
Did you see any differences on the cognitive side?
Differences with me?
Yes.
With the cognitive?
Your cognitive abilities.
It's hard for me to know if the Parkinson's is affecting my cognitive ability or is it just age. I'm 70 years old. I start forgetting things. I start forgetting words, right? Is that? That's normal. But yeah, what's a disorder and what's normal? Is aging a disorder? Definitely. Yes.
My mom, when she was maybe 3 or 4 years into diagnosis of Alzheimer's, I was with her on a 6-month checkup, and the nurse said, "Janet, why don't you go and walk for me?" And down the hall she did and came back, and she said, "I believe you have Parkinson's." So I've spent a lot of time with Alzheimer's as a support group facilitator for caregivers, and my question is, your applications could be so helpful for people also that may be diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I hope maybe you could open that world up a little bit more, because motor control, concentration, I mean, music brings back memory. Short-term memory may be difficult, but long-term is still there. So I hope that you can perhaps open the door a little bit further besides those who are diagnosed with PPD.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. And if anybody has any connections with that could be useful for me to go address a certain group, whether it's an Alzheimer's group or physical therapy or neurologists. I'm happy to go around. I'm taking that time now in this next couple of years to try to write down what I'm talking about. What is it that I know? I'm not really sure yet. I gotta put it all down and keep on working with people with different disorders. And what's fun about talking to a group of neurologists, say you're all neurologists here, I've got street cred. Because I've got PD. And they don't know what I'm talking about from the inside of that. You know, so I could come up here and say anything. And they can't deny what I'm saying. But I'll just finish up. I could keep on going here, but I'll finish up with also saying that you need to have fun playing. I'm finding that adults don't play enough. PD or no PD. So we play a lot of games in the class that I was teaching because I think, first of all, it helps neurologically. And if you know people who have PD to varying degrees, try to play with them. Go to toy stores and pick up games. Anything. This is called a flow ring. You can get this for, $5 or $6 at a store. And what you can do with this, you can do various things. But let me use a different one here. So with a short sleeve shirt, you roll it up and down your arms and it feels great. But also it takes a little bit of control to be able to do it. And then you can do the same thing, put it on a rope. It's like a metal bubble. Very pretty, right? So yeah, I'm moving my arms. I'm raising this arm high. A lot of Parkinson's folks don't make big gestures. And you're playing and suddenly, and try doing this as you're walking, or doing it.
And it's called a flow ring?
It's called a flow ring. Yeah, you can get this online for a few bucks or at a toy store. So I go to toy stores. I look for things. What do you call these things?
Bolo bag. Bolo bag.
Is it a paddleball thing? But they're much smaller. The paddles are much smaller, and they have a little red rubber ball, right? To go like this. Well, I can't do it with the small one, the small paddle. It's really hard. Try it. So I took a bigger paddle and got an elastic string from the
Toy store.
not the toy store, the fabric store, Joanne's Fabric or something. And this is a little squishy practice golf ball, which are great for doing things. So this becomes really easy suddenly. And then you try doing it with your left hand, your odd hand, It's anybody wants to try this, you can come up and try it. I got all kinds of games. Maybe I can come back another time and it'll just be a game hour. Here are the games that I play with Parkinson's and playing anything, playing with dice, because you got to throw the dice. And so if you're with somebody with Parkinson's, have them throw it with their odd hand instead. Change up anything so your mind is working in a different pattern. And I'm sure that when you try a different pattern, throwing the dice with my left hand suddenly, which feels odd at first, but something neurologically is going on that I think is somehow helpful.
Quick story, I care for a lady with Alzheimer's disease. The only thing she knows how to do by herself is if I put a cookie in her hand, she can feed herself. That's the only thing she can do. However, if I put a mixing spoon in her hand and hold her hand and force her hand to stir cookie dough, eventually she starts to relax and I can see the lights come on in her eyes and she starts to stir. And I'm telling you that because if you have contact with somebody with Alzheimer's who can't do dilly squat, If you do something that they used to do, it will, the light comes on, it's so
Yeah,
rewarding.
so, yeah, do something that they already know or used to know how to do. And that's where games come in again.
Right.
When you're kids, find out what they used to play when they were a kid. Playing with jacks, you know, throwing over a wall and catching the jacks. Pick up sticks, all these things that are very physical in a concentrated mental way too, and manipulation is involved. So I think play therapy works on all levels for anything, whether you have a disorder or not. Thank you, everybody.
Are you inviting people to come and play with your toys?
Yeah, sure. Anybody wants to,
And you can stay around for a short time
I
and
can stay around for a little bit.
have refreshments with us. We will certainly ask you to come back again. This has been fascinating, and I know you've got lots of other things that you can tell us about.
There's always
We
things
won't
to talk
lose your
about.
email address.
Yeah, I enjoy coming up with this group. I applaud you for having so many speakers come and for having good turnout. And I've talked to some Osher groups in other places. In St. Albans, they have a group like this, which is very active. So, good work, everybody. Thanks.
And we'll look forward to seeing you next time.